Hey, John.
Hey, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Can you see me?
I cannot, but I can hear you.
You're not. Okay. Well, that means that I'm doing something wrong, which is now. There you go. Now you're welcome to beautiful British Columbia.
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy. That
Very
sounds like
nice.
a Texas term. Howdy.
That is a Texas term.
I'll use some Canadian terms. I'll be interjecting my speech with a lot of a.
Hey,
A. Yeah.
yeah,
Hey, man. Hey. Yeah. Hey.
that works. I'm sure they will get a kick out of that. We have a lot of Australian listeners too, and
Okay.
my co-host likes to pick on them constantly.
Well,
So we all have great fun with random slang that we use in each different country. So
Well, your infectious is your enthusiasm is infectious. I watched a couple of videos of you just to prepare for this interview, and
oh.
congratulations for being the number one podcast in America, or the number two. But when you take the UK out, it makes you number one.
Yeah, that was last year's statistics. I don't know where we fall this year, but we did make it into the top 3 on Apple Podcasts for the whole hobby category.
Oh,
So
fantastic!
yeah,
So,
that
any
was
idea? It must be a tough question to answer, but your average podcast, how many downloads you would get? Are those analytics available to you? Is it 1,000, 5,000, 100? I mean, I just have no idea what your audience would be.
we're roughly around 5,000 downloads a week,
Okay.
but it's spread all over the place. We've got people that are starting on episode 1, and then people that are actually going like their third and fourth time through the entire podcast because they're caught up, and then so they just start over. Some of that is
Wow.
quite bizarre to me. I'm like, you've listened how many times? So
For you, it's like you've got two hobbies on the go. I mean, beekeeping is one hobby, and this becomes a whole world unto itself of learning and meeting people and figuring stuff out. So it's like two hobbies.
yeah, the aspect of the podcast and everything that we've had to kind of create and do with it has definitely put a whole nother spin on the learning curve there, especially when it went global, because then I started getting either questions with terminology that I didn't understand, and I wanted to make sure that I was really relating to what they were saying and not going to give them some way backwards answer. Climates and regions that I've never been experienced with, it made it really interesting. So I've had to start going back and doing a lot of research on my own, which is good, but
Yeah,
that's kind of
yeah.
propelled me forward in that direction. So
Well, I'm already impressed because it looks like you have what is a sound studio there. I can see some type of baffling.
my padded cell.
And those are probably you're probably in a room in your house where you've created a studio where the sound will be dampened with that, and to make accentuate your voice.
Yeah.
And I'm a broadcaster from a million years ago. Shortly after Marconi invented the radio, I came along. But when I was a young man and wanting to record my voice, you'd put egg cartons. You'd actually tack egg cartons upside down onto the wall, and it would have a similar effect, but that
Yeah.
looked much more modern. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a little bit overkill. I actually need to close the door real quick. The We used to record in a radio station here in Austin in
How cool.
under
Yeah.
the umbrella of iHeartMedia. But when COVID happened, nobody's allowed in the studio, so we had to get creative, and I had to turn a space into a makeshift recording studio / office. So I've got a mic that actually drops down from the ceiling. I can kind of rearrange the room as needed to go through and do whatever for the podcast. So it's worked out really well, but it was how does that saying go? Something is the mother of invention.
It's necessity.
Yeah, necessity. There you go.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I didn't realize you were associated with iHeartRadio. So I take back my comment about this being a hobby. I mean, that's a big time radio network. I mean, so do they own the program, or do they have a
They
stake?
do not. They do
You
not.
just bum some studio time there, or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. So they didn't really set up and start taking notice. We talked to them about the whole deal back about a year and a half ago, and they were kind of like, "Oh yeah, that's cute." And then we came to them after we first got started, and we were talking about the amount of listeners and stuff we had gotten over the first few months, and it was very much a patronizing pat on the head, like, yeah, that's cute, whatever. Come back to us whenever you're at this bigger level. And we were like, okay. So we just kind of let it be. And then when we hit the top 3 position on Apple, then all of a sudden some of the people there at the local station started kind of taking note. and our download numbers ended up beating out all of their local podcasts that they had there at the station.
That's great.
And yeah, so then they turned around and they were like, what is this show and why are we not advertising and marketing on it? And like, you know, it's getting more downloads than our sports show, their morning sports show that they were doing.
Wow.
So
Oh, and how long have you been doing it for?
almost 2 years, not quite.
Yeah, well, I guess there's no shortage of material. I mean, it's probably the exact opposite. If you filter through requests coming to you from publishers like mine wanting to get some publicity, and
Yeah.
at the beginning you'd probably be scrambling to look for guests, and now you got to decide who comes on.
Yeah. Let me shut this door real quick and then we'll talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
Might make me a tiny bit more muffled, but there's an echo in the room over here across from us. So
Sounds
keeps that out
fantastic.
there.
On this end, the audio is fantastic. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So initially what the whole concept of the podcast was supposed to be walking somebody through their very first year of beekeeping.
Right.
And I sat down and plotted out the first 6 months of the show and had it all lined up so that we started in January and we could go through and talk about all the prerequisites and everything that they would need. And that led us up to in like April, May, whenever Ken, the co-host, was supposed to get his first thing of bees. That way we would be caught up with time so that when his bees arrived, we could start doing episodes that were very crucial to what we should be doing, you know, at that time. And then he could be learning it because it was his first experience with it. And then he
Right.
could kind of relay that back and we could have these situations where, you know, hey, that was a really bad idea, but it's okay because you guys did it too. So I don't feel so bad now, and kind of be more relatable to everybody out there. So that was the original concept. It has grown obviously beyond that. We started mixing in some interviews here and there just for filler space. And then by the time we made it to the second year, then we've had what you were talking about, where the publishers will reach out and say, hey, I've got this guy that just did this new book on beekeeping and you guys would be great. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting turn of events.
No kidding. Well, as with everything, it's the personality and the brand you've developed. But I don't listen to many podcasts, but the one that I do enjoy is Things You Should Know. Is that what it's called? You know,
I've not heard of that one.
Oh, it's really, but the point I was going to make is that you and your partner, Ken, you bounce off each other well. You know, he's kind of the good old boy. You know, I mean, with all due respect, a little bit rednecky and kind of got a southern drawl. You know, and then you're the young, bright kind of, you know, the voice, and the two of you, it works well. You know, it makes it interesting no matter what the topic is. It's interesting to put the two of you together and have you play off each other. I enjoyed the promos, and we listened to one again in preparation for this. I listened to a couple. I'm not a big podcast consumer. Yeah. But I thought, I'm looking forward to Wednesday morning doing this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Ken cannot join us on these because Ken is very technologically challenged.
I knew you were going to say that before you said this. I knew you were going to say it. So how come you don't have a southern accent like him?
Not sure. I can definitely slip into the Texas draw, but I was kind of a Midwestern boy. I was born and raised in the southwest corner of Kansas, and then kind of migrated Kansas, Missouri, and then eventually Texas. And I keep moving further south. I'm not a fan of the cold.
Okay. Well, we were my girlfriend and I were up at the Outyard last night, and we transported five colonies of bees, 5 hives, an hour and a half away from the side of a mountain down to her house in her van. And then when we finished this interview, we're going to set them up somewhere, but some of them got out of the van, and this morning she went and looked on the windshield, and there was 100 bees on the windshield. So we got to deal with that after I get off this. So
yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, always fun. So are you a beekeeper, or are you more of so you were a beekeeper before this? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm actually a certified master beekeeper with the state of Texas.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's great. I put in, I didn't start off like with the intention of wanting to be any of this or have any of this stuff. It was really I want one hive in my backyard, and like most of us, kind of like you, hey, honey's cool. I really like honey. I want some honey, right? And it did not go as planned. Everything just really snowballed out of control. I had an older gentleman that approached me at my second beekeeper meeting I ever went to, and I had done when I first wanted to get a beehive, I lived up in Missouri at the time, and I was in an apartment. I didn't have the space, couldn't find the space. When I could find the space, it was the wrong time of year, or I didn't have the funds. Like, it was just a constant turnover. So for 5 years, I read every book I could find in the public and the county library. I went and found friends that had hives. I helped them out with their hives. I did everything that I could to learn and absorb, but I never had my own hive until I moved to Austin. And so going to this meeting, on the second meeting was kind of an instructional, hands-on, how to build a hive, how to do this other stuff. And I was very vocal in my questions, or very pointed in some questions. And so this gentleman approached me and he was like, "How long have you been keeping bees?" And I was like, "Oh, my bees don't get here till May. Like, I don't have any bees yet."
Them.
So, but he told me he did removals. He was in his mid-70s at the time. And he said, "I'm getting a little old to be doing some of this stuff, and I could really use the help, but I couldn't pay you much except for honey or bees." And I was like, okay. So that first year should have been one hive. The club said I needed two so I could compare and contrast. I ended up with 13 because of the removals. And then the second year was 25. The third year was 50. Somehow along the way, I became the vice president of that association. I started the Master Beekeeper program. Then I was president of that association.
Man, you got energy. Yeah. You got energy to boot, man. I mean, listen, look at you. You got what, 50 hives? Christ.
Yeah, it's about 46 at the moment. It fluctuates up and down, but I try not to let it go over 50, because that's my pull the hair out moment where I'm like, okay, it's just too many things to do.
Oh, good for you. It sounds like you really found a cool interest and just exploited it and just had a lot of cool experiences through it. Good for you. That's great.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. Okay, so in lieu of time here, I will jump on this, and I'll kind of do a brief intro here for the show. It's all pretty much just conversationalist, and we just go with the flow.
Okay, so just to help me with the length of my answers, how long do you anticipate this will be, or what are your expectations? Just so to help me.
Anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes is okay, perfectly fine.
That's kind of what I was expecting. But if you had said 10 minutes, then I would have shortened my answers. And if you had said this is going to be a six-day session, we'll finish on Saturday, I would have lengthened my answers.
Yeah. You can answer appropriately however you feel. The stories and backstory to it all is perfectly fine.
And you had a chance to go through the book and review it?
I have, yes. They did send me a digital copy so that I could go through and actually take a look at the book. I got quite a kick out of it. I found myself chuckling and giggling to myself. So you did very good. As you said in the very beginning, you think education's better when it's wrapped in humor. You did a really good job of making sure there's plenty of humor in there. Plenty of humor indeed, and plenty of moments where you're like, oh no.
What the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? I could be doing other things. I want to go stamp collecting. Why did I choose this hobby?
Right. It is not a hobby that is for the faint of heart, really. Okay, so I will start this off, and we will just kind of go from there.
Sure. And my last name is pronounced Doroghy. It's an unusual name. It's a Hungarian name.
Doroghy.
Doroghy, that's correct, yeah.
Doroghy, okay. Doroghy. I was going to actually, that was one of my first questions that I had on there, was so that I could say it right at the beginning of the show. Doroghy, okay.
Doroghy.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Hive Jive. I am here today with a very special guest. Again, we are doing an interview, so as you've heard me repeat numerous times, Ken is not going to be with us today, but we are working on that. He's in the process of getting a brand new laptop and a brand new phone and all the fun little accessories that go along with it. So hopefully he will start being able to join us here very soon, and we can have a lot more fun with these. But for today, in place of Ken, I have a very special guest. We're going to be speaking with Dave Doroghy, and Dave is the author of a new book called Show Me the Honey, The Adventures of a Accidental Apiarist. Maybe almost a reluctant beekeeper for sure when it comes down to it. But Dave, you have done quite a few things in your life prior to bees ever being on the horizon. You were a marketer for the Olympics and the NBA, correct?
That's correct, and nice to meet you, John, electronically here, but
right, virtually. Welcome to COVID.
Sorry, Ken can't be here. I love his southern drawl, and yes. But you've got a very clear, beautiful speaking voice too. Yeah, but no, you're right. I was my career was in sports marketing, and I was we had an NBA team up here in Vancouver, the Vancouver Grizzlies. They moved to Memphis. and I was the vice president of the team in Vancouver, and I moved down to Memphis with them. I spent about 8 years in the NBA and then 10 years in the Olympic Games. So to switch from sports marketing to beekeeping, you can really see the parables there, and you can really draw a close analogy between sports marketing and beekeeping, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, you also have a background in radio broadcasting.
As I mentioned to you, a million years ago, just right after Marconi invented the radio, I came about, and I was a disc jockey. If you were an insomniac in Vancouver, Canada, in 1979, if you couldn't sleep, you know who I am, because I did the all-night show on a radio station up here as a disc jockey for, good heavens, for 4 years. That was my first career, is radio broadcasting. Yeah.
Wow, very
Yeah.
cool. And that was old school, like disc jockey actually meant something, because you
We
literally
used
had to switch out the discs and the
Oh
the
man, you
tracks.
would play records. You go back a quarter of a turn so that when you hit the record, it would speed up, and you'd say something clever, Tony, Orlando, and Don, and you'd put a disc on and then play it, and then you do the time and temperature, and everything's changed so much. But it's absolutely wonderful to hear the success of your podcast
Thank
and
you.
to be involved in something modern and something new. And we were discussing this earlier before you had me on, and every day you get feedback on how many people are listening and who's out there. We'd have to wait 3 months to get the ratings to come in before the general manager would come down the hall and say, you're fired, no one's listening to you. But podcasts are modern, they're up to date, and you seem to be in the cutting edge with, I love the name Hive Jive. I mean, who thought of that? It sounds like a
wife.
Smokey Robinson song, the
Yeah.
Hive Jive.
Yeah. Ken's wife actually is the one that came up with that, and I don't remember if it was Jive Hive or Hive Jive, but she had the words all there, and we kind of played with it, looked around to see what else was out there, and then finally settled on the Hive Jive. And jive can go many different ways, but I thought it was very fitting for, like, hey, it's a couple people just going to sit around and we're just going to chat about bees and see where it takes us. And so it's
Well, I
been
wish you
great.
nothing but success, man. I love your enthusiasm. Your background, both of you in bees, is authentic. You know what you're talking about. And that's why I'm nervous about this interview, because I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to bees. You guys do. It's kind of like, don't ask me, do they have 4 legs or 6 legs? I'm not sure, They got legs.
Is a scorpion an arachnid, or is it not? Because technically it has 10 instead of 8, but
Exactly.
So you made a comment there that made me think of something that I did pick up on when I was going through the book, talking about the clever name. A lot of the chapter names in there seem to be either very close play on words to music, song titles, and or movie or TV shows, and I got a big kick out of that as well.
Well, I'm sure you read the chapter, or you got a kick out of the chapter's name. I've looked at bees from both sides now.
Yep,
Now
I
you're
was going to
younger
bring
than
that
me,
up.
but are you familiar with what that is a reference to?
It is a love song, I believe. from
Judy
back in the day.
Collins, about 1968. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, but I describe when you're beekeeping in the outyard, where there's 100,000 bees out there, because that's where we keep all the hives in the outyard, and you're watching the bees walk on the outside of your veil. It's not an unnatural thing. You might have 10, 12, you might have 20 bees there, and what are you seeing? You're seeing their stomachs. That's all you see.
Yep.
And I try to describe in that chapter the one moment where you're looking at the outside of your veil, kind of think, oh God, there's a lot of bees on here. But you realize that one of them, you're not looking at its stomach and its legs, you're looking at its wings, which can only mean one thing. It's on the inside of your veil.
Yep.
I've looked at bees from both sides now, and that 1 second of you're just beekeeping to, oh my God, I've got a real problem in here. There's a bee on the inside of the veil. And then you realize, you feel a bead of sweat going down your head, and it's going down like sweat does, because often, in Austin, where you are, up here in the summers in British Columbia, it gets very hot. You're in your beekeeping suit, and you're sweating, but then you're really feeling it, but you feel a bead of sweat going the other way, going up, and you go, oh my God, that's not. So that's what that chapter was about, the terror when you get a bee on the inside of your veil. And I've had so many zipper breakdowns, holes in my suits, just things I forgot to do up, and
Yep.
beekeeping, as the book points out, you said it before, it's not for the faint of heart. It is not. It is not easy.
Yeah, it is. It is not it's kind of an interesting like duality to it, because it can be used for PTSD and stress and relaxation, but it depends on what you're doing and the situation that you're in. If you've got one colony in your backyard and they're very gentle, it can be a very zen experience. But if you're dealing with a lot of colonies and there's a lot of chaos and you're in a rush, it is completely the opposite of that experience.
Exactly. And I'm not a good beekeeper. And the book is very, very, it was reviewed recently by the New York Times, and they said self-deprecating was the word that they used for it. And it is self-deprecating. I in no way pretend to be an expert. I try to point out some of the funny things, wrap some of the lessons in humor. My girlfriend's a great beekeeper, Jeannie. And, when she goes into the hive, she takes the time, she's free of all other thoughts, and she focuses on the situation at hand. I've always got an appointment going on. I've only got 10 minutes to do it. I got my cell phone on. I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner and, trying to figure out what my shopping list is and how to deal with my next meeting. I'm not in the moment. And I think the bees pick up on that.
Yeah.
I think that if you're distracted and you're just not into it, haven't given yourself enough time, it's a recipe for disaster. As I drop my hive tool, knock a frame over, trip on something, and then notice that my zipper's not done up. It's like I'm like the Keystone Cops of beekeeping.
See, Ken has a lot of those same issues. His son and I both are often telling him, slow down, go slow. And he's like, I don't do anything slow. And we're like, yes. And they realize that.
Yeah.
Got to take a step back and go a little bit slower with it. It is definitely, it can be a learning curve in there, but we all have moments. I've had some zipper failure moments that are epic. And luckily some of the worst ones ended up being best case scenarios where it didn't go as bad as it could. But the suits that we wear are the triple layer, like triple thick. They've got a mesh on the outside and they've got a woven kind of waffle foam on the inside center.
Right.
So air can go through it, but it's super heavy. It's thick enough that if the bees try to sting you, their stinger actually doesn't stick. It goes between the holes. And so you don't get the pheromone release and you don't get the dead bees. So that helps, but they can still find places. The sleeve is still just that canvas, and it's thin. And then of course, some sadistic SOB out there invented these bee gloves that have a screen right across your wrist.
Oh yeah, it's yellow. Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, because that's a fun place to get stung. Let's give them a vent there so the bees can access them and reach them.
Well, when I talk about one of my zipper failures, I put a great deal, and I've never thought more about a zipper in my life than when I got stung 3 times on the face, and then we took the suit off. And imagine I describe it in the book, just doing up a zipper properly. And then in the middle of the zipper, like not at the end or at the beginning, but in the middle, it just starts to kind of, it comes apart. The zipper teeth, I think there's an XYZ corporation that makes zippers. There's probably 2 zipper manufacturers in the world, but you'd think that would be really important for a bee suit manufacturer to get the best zipper that's not just going to come apart with some cheap plastic teeth,
Yep.
So you go into the hive and you've got, let's say, a 4-inch gap at the back of your head. You can't see it.
Yeah.
And as you know, the bees are smart. If there's a way in, they'll find it.
Yeah,
and that realization when you see a bee walking around the inside, what do? You smash yourself to hit it when you're hitting yourself in the head. You run away, and and all the bees are following you. My girlfriend said you look like Pigpen running down the road, smashing yourself in the head.
Yep. Yeah, you have your own little cloud of dust following you around.
Like the Peanuts cartoon Pigpen. But I've never given so much thought to a zipper in my life as when that happened. And it was something as simple as that. So I bought a different brand. I guess that's part of getting into beekeeping, is you learn what brands and what manufacturers make the good stuff. You talk to other beekeepers. Eventually, after a few years, you solve these problems. We were at the Outyard last night, and I didn't get bit once. I didn't have any mishaps. But the chapter talks about the first time we went up there, and it was just a calamity of errors.
Yep.
That you just go, wow. You go, did that happen? You come home and you sit down and you think, I'm going to write some of that down because I'm going to forget it in a few years. And I can't believe what happened just happened,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what the book, huh?
I'm surprised you didn't give yourself a concussion with as many times as you were smacking yourself.
Yeah, get a nosebleed because you hit yourself so hard in the face. Yeah.
Yeah. You had multiple instances on just that one adventure. You'd already been stung. Then finally you thought it was over with. And then you felt the one crawling around on you. And it's in there. You're panicking. Yeah, it is actually a terrifying feeling. And I think any beekeeper who hasn't experienced it, they will eventually. There's always that moment where you're looking and you do have that moment where you're like, oh, that's different. Why does that look different? And then you're like, oh God, that's the wrong side of the bee. You're
Yep.
looking at its back instead of its stomach.
And bee stings, it's not as, I don't know. I see some people, they beekeep without suits on. I mean, is that for real, or is that some kind of fake news? You can imagine beekeeping, with your bare hands, or, I
Yeah.
know people do it. I'm sure you interview people and people that do. But I've often thought, and I devote some time to this in one of the chapters, what would beekeeping be like if bees didn't sting? It would really be a different hobby. I mean, it would take all of the fun of being able to dress up like, a Halloween costume out of it. It would, I'm sure that bears and other animals would have free reign on stealing honey because they wouldn't get stung. The
Yep.
honey wouldn't be as precious if bees didn't sting. So the stinging, the pain is a really important element, I think, of the final product being much more sought after, much more special, much more revered. When you get the honey, you had to go through a dangerous maneuver to get this honey. So I try to
Yeah.
point that out. The stinging is an important part of beekeeping, and get
Yeah.
used to it.
It's
It
the
always
price you
hurts,
pay.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the price you pay to be able to have the honey, and to make sure that everything is, it's fair. You give and take, and you're
Yeah.
taking from them, so you have to take a few stings in the process.
And that's another chapter when because I was a new beekeeper when I wrote the book, is the taking. I was quite not disappointed, but I found it a little bit shocking how really what we're doing is stealing honey from the bees. Okay, so when people find out you're a beekeeper, they're first, oh, fantastic, you're doing it for the environment. They think that you are like God's gift to nature. You're so wonderful, and you go, not really. I'm stealing something that they made. Like, it's not mine. I'm taking it.
Yeah.
So I found that kind of surprising. The nature of beekeeping, the fundamental premise is
Yeah.
that we kind of fool them into making more than they need and then take it. And then what do we do? I don't know about in Austin, but up here in Canada, after we harvest the honey, we feed them sugar water. Do you guys do that?
So it depends on the situation. Ultimately, we go through. So the bees are predispositioned to make a ton of honey to begin with, and
Right.
they're made for the climates like where you're at, where it can get bitter cold and stay cold longer. But then down here, we don't have that. But they're still going to make as much honey as they can. But they literally only need 40 pounds. Like one medium box is all they need to survive our winter. And some winters they come out of that and they've still got 4 or 5 frames of solid capped honey left over.
All right.
So it's a much easier give and take for us. We can take 100 pounds off of a hive, leave 40 or 50 pounds there, and they're perfectly good. But we have the summer dearth and the winter dearth. So right now we're in the summer dearth, where it is so hot, nothing grows, nothing blooms, there's no nectar. So we do our honey harvest just before that. And if you are a responsible beekeeper, you're trying to leave them that 40 pounds of honey there. If they don't, then yes, you get back into a situation where either you took too much or they burn through their food stores, and you have to start doing that supplemental sugar feeding of the sugar syrup.
Right. And that was the second revelation that I had. I thought, oh, it's kind of odd that we're stealing this stuff, and people think we're superheroes of nature for interfering with their lives and stealing their honey. Okay. And the second one was then, I learned that, from the bee club, well, now you have to feed them sugar water. And I can't think of anything more unhealthy than just water and sugar. I mean, it's almost like feeding them poison. Would you feed that to your kids? Just here's a drink a bunch of sugar mixed in with water,
Yeah.
So and then, up here we're more seasonal, whereby, it gets cold in the winter. You've taken a bit too much honey. If you want to keep them alive, you hold the key. It's a boiling broth of just pure white granulated sugar mixed 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, like a sticky syrup,
Yep.
And no one told me that after you boil it, you got to cool it down, So one of my first experiences, I stuck it in there. It's boiling away. I think, oh, I got to do this. I got to get going. I'm late for a meeting. Oh, damn it. I got to feed my bees, I mean, it's like a one more thing to do, but I'll do it quickly because I'm a responsible beekeeper. I'll boil up the water. What time is it? It's 10 to 7. Geez, I got to get going. Okay, so I just take it with my gloves on, put it in there. And then I come in the next day and all the bees are dead because their proboscises had burnt off because I fed them boiling sugar water,
Yep.
So this is what the book is all about, coming up against dumb things I do. And then someone say, you didn't really do that, did you? Yeah. Well, okay. You got to let the sugar water cool down, Dave. You don't just boil it and feed it to them. Do you have any brains? How could you have done that? So that's just one example. There's hundreds of mistakes that I made that people can learn from. Don't make my mistakes.
Yeah. And I mean, the answer to a lot of that is, well, I know now.
Exactly. But then it also occurred to me as odd that, if they keep on eating the sugar water and then, producing honey kind of, I know it takes them through the winter, but I'm wondering, is any of the honey in those little cells just processed sugar water? I mean, what's the point of beekeeping if you're just processing the sugar through their systems, they can make what tastes like honey? But
Yeah.
it's not the case. I mean, it's more complicated than that. By the time
Right.
the spring rolls around, they're back out on their regular patrol to get nectar.
Yeah. Yeah, we go through a very complicated process of making sure, like for me specifically, we will feed if they need it. We'll feed in the very, very late part of winter, early part of spring. And then the whole goal for us, based on our nectar flow, is we stop feeding around the middle of April at the latest, if not the beginning of April. And
Right.
when we do feed, we're only feeding 1 quart jar every week. So
Okay.
it gives them plenty of time to take it, burn through it, use it to raise the brood or draw out wax, and then never enough for them to actually store it and cap it. If they're storing and capping it, you're feeding them too much. And the whole point of that is we're just trying to get them by until that nectar flow starts. And then when
Right.
it does start, we back off and there shouldn't be any excess sugar in there. And then they can go from there and build up. So that's usually the plan. I do agree though, like nectar has a lot of stuff in it. Honey has a lot of stuff in it. The pollen has a lot of stuff in it. You're looking at all these amino acids. You're looking at all these minerals and different content that's down inside there. And sugar doesn't have that. It's just straight
No.
sucrose and water, and that's it. So we do add in an electrolyte mix that we put in there for them. And we also put in probiotics that are specifically for bees. So we try and bolster that up a little bit to help with some of the offsets that it can have from being just the
Well,
sugar.
that sounds awfully complicated to me, and I don't want to have to even.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to spell. I wouldn't know an electrolyte if it fell off the sky and dropped to my foot. And I'm
Yeah.
just happy to do, to do sugar and water and let it cool down is about as complicated as I'm willing to allow it to be. But I understand that some of these, and you told me earlier that you have 48 hives or something. You're not a commercial beekeeper per se, but I'm sure that you're knowledgeable on big commercial operations. I'm sure
Yeah, I know
given
several
your interest.
large. Yeah,
You
I
have
know
you have
several
gone
large
out to see
beekeepers.
some of them, and somebody told me that they have giant vats of honey outdoors not honey of sugar water that the bees can go visit. Is that true? That if you
Some
had a
do.
commercial apiary, that you might just have a big garbage can full of sugar water that you leave out there?
Yeah, there is a beekeeping operation in Saskatchewan actually that has giant drums, metal drums that they
Yes.
fill with hay and wood, and then they fill that with sugar syrup. Or in some cases, some people use corn syrup, which we try not to do because then that's even further down the sketchy road of, now you're back to almost your analogy of I might as well feed them a Coke.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there are some people that will do that to help bulk them up for the wintertime. They'll put out, if they've got too many hives, they'll put out massive drums full of straw and hay so that the bees can walk on it as the sugar level goes down and just feed them that way. I was
Yeah.
kind of shocked to see that myself, but I have seen that.
Well, my book looks at the importance of commercial beekeeping and how the industry might not be alive if it weren't for the almond crops, which I found really interesting. But we could argue that. But putting that aside, I think that for your listeners and for general public to know, I mean, as long as you're buying your honey from at a farmer's market or a local guy like you or me that has very few hives, you're likely to get the real thing,
Yeah.
And I think that's another wonderful aspect of beekeeping is that you go to Costco and you buy it off the shelf there and you don't know what you're getting. Whereas buy it off a guy that you just know down the road that keeps bees, you're going to pay 30 or maybe 50% more for the jar. But
Yep.
at least you know that a lot of pain went into it. And the guy or woman that raised them probably got stung a bunch of times, so that it's more satisfying for you to slather on your toast knowing some pain went into it. And, some jackass was doing everything wrong to get it to come out the other end.
Oh, that's great. I like that.
You buy a commercial, thing from Costco, big deal. It's like it's like came out of a factory.
Right.
Blood, sweat, and tears went into our honey, John.
That's
We
right.
care. We love them all. Each bee.
Well, we try to love them all. It depends on the day we've had.
Yeah.
So you've kind of had many bouts of why the hell did I get into this and I'm done. And then obviously you're still with it. You've still stuck with it. But back in 2012, that's when your sister gifted you that first hive.
Yes.
I take it there are no more hives on the boat at this point. They're all out of the
No, they're still alive. First of all, for your listeners, To make my story weirder, I live on a floating home. I mean, I don't know if they have float homes down in Austin, Texas. I live on a river, a big river in British Columbia called the Fraser River, just outside of Vancouver. And I'm on an old beat up barge that is in a river estuary that goes up and down with the tide. So the first thing we were worried about, my sister was sitting on my deck one day, you know, sitting out there, and she says, Dave, she's a beekeeper. She's an ardent beekeeper. Really good at it. And she said, you know, it's so beautiful out here. You've got the riparian zone with plants that grow on the river. You've got a deserted island in front of where you live. Behind you are a bunch of farms, you know, potato farms and raspberry and blueberry farms. Would you mind if I dropped off one of my hives and just left it here? And here's the key, John, here's the key. These words, I'll do all the work, those 5 words. So I looked at it, I go, no, you know, I mean, barring when I have guests over and have a barbecue in my back deck, and they're not going to sting them, are they? No. So she leaves it there with her husband. They come by one night, Len and Miriam, and they drop off the hives. And, you know, I couldn't help but be interested. And she'd come by a couple of weeks later and go through the hive and look for the queen. And I'd kind of stand there and look at them. And I took a bit of an interest. And at Christmas, she gives me a Christmas card saying the hive is yours. It's, you know, happy Christmas. They're yours. 15,000 little insects. I mean, what am I going to do on the back of my barge in the winter in Canada? You know, so it was sink or swim. So I, as I describe in the book, I took a beekeeping course. I went to a beekeeping convention. I joined clubs, but I was so lousy at everything I did. You know, I'm a certified apiarist. You know, so are you. What did you say? You have the master certificate?
I'm a master beekeeper, certified master beekeeper.
But I found all those books so boring to read and everything, and all the studying and the biology and the memorizing the thorax and the abdomen and the you know, all these parts, and you know, whether they got nosema or noxema. I couldn't.
Is it a face cream or a disease? I don't know.
Is it you know, I mean, and I was busy, but some after the 3rd or 4th hive died, somebody said, well, take a beekeeping course. You know, the club hasn't helped, and the, you know, the convention that you went to didn't help. And when I got the books, I just look at the pictures. I mean, I'm not going to memorize, you know.
I got time for that.
You know, American fowl brood. Is that a bird, or what is American fowl brood? You know, and what is, you know, mite vaporization, all these things. I failed biology 9 in high school, and I have very little interest in anything that requires memorization, pedantic book learning.
Yeah.
So I took
entomology was not your choice. That was your sister's.
Exactly. And your listeners should know, you know, now part-time, I teach some university courses in international sports marketing, but I had to take this exam. I hadn't taken an exam to, you know, the exam that I had to take to get the beekeeping certificate, which I really wanted because my sister had it, and my girlfriend had it, and I wanted to be a certified beekeeper. I cheated on the exam, you know, I mean, I hate to admit it. I wrote the answers on my hand, and here I am, I'm an adult, you know, I'm in my late 50s, you know, had a career and everything. Yeah. And I'm all nervous about this stupid beekeeping exam. It's as ridiculous as bees in the inside of my veil. I mean, I'm getting all uptight. I can't sleep at night. The exam's next week. I missed 3 classes. I haven't done any of the readings. I'm going to fail the exam. You know, but that chapter that I write about, called Bee School, I put a lot of scientific information in there about the bees, which I do find fascinating. I just don't want to memorize it all, because you can just Google it nowadays. Why bother learning it?
Yeah. Pick up your phone and hey Google or hey Siri, and you're good to go.
Right, but there's a big difference if you Google noxema and it should have been nosema, because you might end up spreading a bunch of disease on your face when you want it to be a skin cream, yes. Or you might end up putting a nice smell perfume in the hive that was meant for Yeah.
It's that is one of the fun things, that some of the terminology can be really interesting, but it's really that I actually just got a call from the chief apiary inspector for the state of Texas, and I hung up on her.
You have an argument over something?
No, I don't know. My phone just started ringing, and then by default, I went and swiped it down. And as soon as I did, I saw who it was, and I was like,
"You mean right now? You mean right now?" Right now. Probably her saying, "Get that idiot off your show. He's taking beekeeping back 100 years." You know.
She's a character. She's a really great lady and everything. But if she's calling me, there's probably it can't be good.
You know what? It's funny you mention that, because when I finished writing the book, because I kind of thought I didn't want it to lose credibility, because it's got a bunch of misinformation in it, and you know, and that would be bad if, you know, I refer to the bees as the boys when they're girls, or fundamental stuff like that, you know.
Right.
So a friend of ours is one of the bee inspectors up here in British Columbia, Axel. So I had him read the whole book, and I said, and he's very scientific, and he works for the provincial government of British Columbia, inspecting hives, and he has an area. It's probably the same down in the state of Texas. And then we sat down, and he said, look, I get it. A lot of stuff, you want to be funny. You're trying to make a point. I can let you do that. This one, you got to change. No, you can't put that in there. Take that out, change it, and it was really helpful to have him go through the whole book, circle things, and saying, now it's still a dumb book with a whole bunch of stupid mistakes you made, but at least it's accurate. And I haven't had many beekeepers since the book came out about 3 months ago, take umbrage with anything and tell me that I made a huge mistake despite my lack of knowledge,
Yeah. So what you're saying is you did not create another cartoon version of the Bee movie.
I can't remember if I saw the Bee movie. That's the one Jerry Seinfeld was a voice, yes. And someone told me that the bees were all boys.
It is the most
lost its credibility right off the bat.
Yeah, it is the most inaccurate, horrible depiction of how a beehive in a colony would work. It's very sexist. It's very, like, the whole thing is just so wrong.
I heard that exact same thing, but I haven't seen that movie. It's only 20 years old. Maybe I'll get around to watching it on Netflix.
I mean, if you wanted to watch it just from a comical standpoint of how horribly inaccurate it is, that would be okay. But otherwise, you're perfectly fine never watching it. But no, so your book, actually, it does a really great job. You go through and again, you manage to take these lessons that you learned and put them in a comical light, self-deprecating if it is, and go through and you get the point across. And it's one of those things that kind of like what we originally envisioned that first year of our show to be like, is a concept where somebody who's just getting started or who has been doing it for a little while can read it and can say, oh, wow, I don't feel so bad. I had a moment like that. I did that, and it's okay. We all have those experiences, and you're able to share it, which then if it's a brand new beekeeper, they can read it and go, okay, things not to do.
Right. And I find that people learn through analogies so well, but the chapter that I do on swarming bee clubs, I was at a bee club meeting one night, and there was talk about the club getting too big because it was so crowded in the basement, and there was no air conditioning, and it was hot and crowded. And as we took a coffee break, someone in the bee club said, I think we're going to start our own bee club and get Harry, Sal, Bill, and Mel are going to come over, and we're going to move our bee club to another church near the basement. And then I thought to myself, Christ, we're a bee club swarming,
Yep, you're doing a reproductive split.
And I thought, what's the criteria for the new clubhouse going to, where we meet going to be? Well, we want it to be in a convenient location. We want it to be easy to find. We want it to be, and then as I was driving home that night, I'm kind of scouting a new location. I'm thinking, I'm turning into a bee, I mean, our club is going to morph and swarm into two. Mm-hmm. Or, why? Because, well, the PA system was lousy. We couldn't hear the president. Well, once the communication breaks down with the queen and the hive gets too hot and crowded, so it just kind of hit me like, what a great way to describe a swarm, in a way that's easy to understand, it's comical, and it's a fundamental, premise of beekeeping. So I've got about a dozen of those in there where something happens and I think, well, this is a cool way to describe it that's not boring like the books that I never read when I've almost failed my beekeeping exam,
Yeah.
So I think that's, for somebody that's thinking of taking up beekeeping, it's a cool book because you'll understand right off the bat, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's painful. And in the end, it may not yield you one frickin' jar of honey. Oh, great. Sounds like a hobby I want to get into, Like I reviewed the costs of, a bee suit. Okay. And then you got to buy an extractor. And then you're going to have to buy, oh, wait a minute. You need to get some more frames. Oh, wait a minute. Have you got
Yeah. You've got a whole chapter in there of the price associated with each of these things.
It's easily $1,000 right off the bat. Okay. Then I think, okay, now I'm set. I'm going to get, I'm going to get hundreds of jars of honey. I'm going to show up at dinner parties with my honey that I made. Much better than bringing a bottle of wine. I'm so erudite and interesting. I've, created my, then you get maybe 5 jars, cost you $1,000 for the equipment. Well, that's $200 a jar,
Yep.
But, I've had some good years. I've had with my one hive, and now I have 2 hives in the back of the float home. I've had some years where I've harvested 100, 150 pounds, and then you bottle it and it's satisfying. And, heck, I wrote a book about it. So it's been don't get me wrong, it's been a great hobby, but I think anybody considering going into it needs to be aware of, there's a really good chance. What would you say, John, are the chances of a first year beekeeper having his hive live for an entire year, make it through the winter? And, how many hives die would be, you know more about beekeeping than me.
Yeah, so
What percentage?
national average is about 40 to 50%
Yes.
colony loss. And
Thank
so
you.
if you only have one hive, it's literally a coin toss. Is it going to live or is it not?
Yeah.
And there's so many different things that could take it out. You know, the population of the colony got weak due to disease and mites or due to management practices. Maybe they starved, maybe they freeze because they couldn't stay warm enough. You know, like there's so many things that could go into it. You might have accidentally squished your queen, didn't know it. There's no eggs in there to make a new queen. They go queenless, they spiral and die. The next time you go, it's just, you know, spider webs and worm poop.
Well, I think that message, the 50%. So no, I beat up. I got into a real psychological down here because every year my hive was diving and I felt inadequate. That I'm a grown man cheating on exams. I'm not advancing it. I'm killing all these wonderful insects, and I'm really down on myself at the end of the book. And I realized it's really not me. I mean, half the hives die. And then I reflect on 50 years ago. This gentleman, Axel, that helped me is older than me. The guy that I've described as being the bee inspector. He's 15 years older than me. And he said, when we kept bees where I lived with my dad back in the early 60s, it was completely different. He
Yeah,
said, you'd put a box out there. You didn't worry about any of these diseases, this or that. You'd come by 4 months later and take the honey out.
yeah,
And so at the end of the book, I reflect upon, look, it is me. I'm incompetent and I'm not good at it, but there's a lot of other factors going on. Even if I did everything right, I'm glad that you verified, John, that it's a 40 to 50% chance that your hive is not going to make it.
yeah,
So I stopped beating myself up and I start looking at colony collapse disorder and start looking at all the other factors that are detrimental to bees. And then at the end, I have the revelation that even if I am lousy and make it, it's still worth doing because they're just so fascinating to observe. Even if you don't get an ounce of honey or the recognition you deserve through a certificate from passing the course or any of that, it doesn't matter because just being in there is a very interesting experience to watch the way they collaborate, watch them. They're always on the same page working together. They're never arguing. They're always just so. I
yeah.
love just looking at them, but I'm not a good beekeeper.
There are many parallels in beekeeping that are lessons that we could definitely take and use towards humanity for sure when it comes to the cooperation and how they get things done and how efficient they are and how
Yeah.
effective their methods are. Like it just all the way around, we could learn so much from that as a species and
And
being
then
able to be
yeah. And
honest and yeah,
the other cool thing is you're down there in Austin, Texas, and we're talking about something that we really have in common. I'm up here in Canada, and my partner Jeannie and I were just in India. I was teaching over a university over in India for the month of January, and while we were there, we'd take tours and be at the country roads, and somebody would be keeping bees, and we'd observe the hobby over there. So whenever I travel anywhere, it's the same bee. It's the Apius marifila. I can't even pronounce it. It was a question in the test. I don't know how to spell it. Apius marifila.
apis, apis mellifera.
And that's the Latin term for honeybee.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and I think there's 10,000 different kinds of bees. I've tried to
Yes.
memorize them all, but I only got to number 3. Apis melliferae is universal.
Yeah,
So it makes your life more interesting. You're traveling somewhere, you run into a beekeeper. It's not like it's a different species somewhere else. I mean, somebody told me they're in every continent in the world except for Antarctica. That the bee is just proliferated the globe.
yeah.
And I just find that fascinating in itself. This is a universal hobby that binds people together. We have nothing in common, but now we're having a wonderful conversation about something that interests us both.
Yes. Yeah, it can definitely bring people together and cross divides, and that's something that the show has really just like demonstrated to myself and to Ken is people from all across the globe reach out and say they love the show or they really like this aspect, and then they share their own adventures and things that they're experiencing in their world. And that is the bridge that connects us all. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that commonality. We wouldn't know those people. We wouldn't know those stories. So it's been really wonderful from that aspect of being able to use beekeeping to reach out to everybody like that.
Yeah, very, very, very cool what you're doing, and it's a very, very cool hobby. But again, it is not an easy hobby, and it's you got to go into it with your eyes wide open, and it helps so much. You mentioned that you had a mentor and an older gentleman that kind of helped get you into it, and it really helps when you join a club or you have family or friends that are going to be there. Just to do it on your own and to try to get into it without the support of others is quite daunting and almost overwhelming. You need people to help you.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of listeners that are in that situation, and that's one of the reasons that they enjoy the show is They don't necessarily have anybody around in their area. They don't have a bee club in their area, but they can tune into the podcast and they can become part of this bigger family
Right.
and share those experiences with everybody. And we do, I mean, we're on our 11th listener question episode. We just put that out last week. They write into us. We go through, we read their questions on the air. We answer their questions. And we're working our way up actually to doing live virtual shows, but live shows where we can actually converse with them live in real time and answer their questions that way as well. So it's amazing kind of what technology is going to be able to allow us to do, where, you know, I can talk to people from Canada and Australia and the United Kingdom, and we can all be on one call and talk about our bees and what's going on. And that's amazing,
Well,
actually.
I like the kind of juxtaposition here, because the hobby is really old fashioned. There's nothing really modern about beekeeping. It's not as though we've developed an app that tracks the bees, and, you know, almost everything in life has changed so much. But when Langstroth, you know, that's the one thing I remember.
Yeah.
You know who
Dr.
he is.
Langstroth, yeah.
Langstroth, the inventor of the Langstroth Hive, which was one of the true or false questions in that damn test I took. You know, when Langstroth, and you know, the test asked you, what year did Langstroth invent the hive? Who cares? I think it was 1873 or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't matter. 1872. But, you know, not much has changed, really. I mean, the bees go out, they collect the honey, they bring it back. You figure out a way to harvest it. But now you're putting a real modern spin on the communications aspect with a podcast and just taking it to the next level to let people know about it.
Yeah.
But the hobby itself has not changed that much, or the bees have not changed in a million frickin' years, and they're not going to change for another million years. The way we interact with them hasn't changed that much either. You put on a suit to protect yourself, you go in there, you do it, you try to learn about them. But the podcast is so modern and so cool what you're doing, spreading the information like a pheromone in the hive, man. You're like a pheromone, a digital pheromone.
Fanning it out there.
You're fanning it out to planet Earth, you know, in kind of all these different digital ways through Google Play and Apple Podcast and Podbean, and you're just fanning out that pheromone. And, you know, some people pick up on it. Most people won't. The people that do might do it for years. They might try it once, but it's really cool. I'm really impressed with your energy and what you guys are trying to achieve here.
Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And in reference to your book, again, for everybody out there, the book is Show Me the Honey, The Adventures of an Accidental Apiarist. And we were lucky enough to be able to get a copy of it that we're going to be able to send to one of our listeners as just kind of a fun little token or prize. So here's what you guys need to do if you would like to enter in a chance to win a copy of the book here from Dave. Go out on either Facebook or Instagram, either one, and share with us your most memorable, oh my God, there's a bee in my suit moment. And we will go through and randomly choose from those and pick a winner, and we will send you guys a copy of Dave's book. And I think that is probably, like, the book has so many things in it, but the whole thing about seeing the bees from both sides and your experience of the bee suit reminds me of instances I've had of funny videos I've seen where, you know, the beekeeper is running off into the sunset screaming and flailing. And like, so we all have those moments. So I think if everybody out there, you know, if you guys want a chance to win a copy of the book, definitely Facebook or Instagram, share us your story of your funny encounter with a bee inside your suit.
I can't wait to read some of them. And because I'm not shy of blatant self-promotion, thank you for that plug on the book.
Yes.
But the book is also available. This is terrible when a guest comes on. Oh, also available.
No.
Because we mentioned I was a radio broadcaster a million years ago. The publishers asked me to do an audio version of the book. And I think that any people like your listeners that enjoy getting information through the audio, you know, way of doing things, might enjoy the download. You go on Audible or Amazon or wherever, and you can download an audio version of the book. I wouldn't recommend you listen to it while you're beekeeping, because you don't want that distraction, but you can listen to it in your car or while you're going to bed or whatever. But it just is absolutely wonderful to have met you, John. And Ken, you know, I was really looking forward to meeting him. You know, that we just love that Southern Texas drawl. It just is so charming. And, you know, maybe another time I'll be invited back and be able to meet him too.
Yeah, Ken is a character. He is literally a thoroughbred redneck, like, and he's proud of it.
The term redneck up here in Canada has some not great connotations.
Has a different meaning.
I'm surprised to hear you just say that like that.
Yeah, down here in Texas, we're all like, yeah, we're a bunch of rednecks. You know, you got your rednecks, you got your hicks, you got your hillbillies. You know, it just depends on the region where you're at.
We're just
It
a bunch of Canucks up here in Canada.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
See, it just it's just all in how, you know, where you grow up and kind of what it is. Um, Ken embraces it wholeheartedly, so we just run with it. He was the first one to say, "Well, I'm a redneck," and I'm like, "Well, there you go. That is, you are
Well,
officially branded that on the show."
there you go. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have met you, and the podcast is great. I'm going to continue listening to it, and you know, we got brought together through a little insect. Who'd have thunk it?
Right, right. It's amazing what that little bee can do in all aspects of life, and both their colonies and hives and in our lives as well. So I think it's great. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I'm glad you actually talked about the audiobook because I didn't realize that there was an audio version. I knew that there was the paperback copy of it and people could go out there and get that. But that's awesome that you did an audio version
Well,
because,
there's a Kindle version too. So nowadays when you publish a book, you got to write the damn thing. It took me 2.5 years of doing that, and then you got to do the Kindle version. You got to go to the studio. It's great. I mean, there's all these formats. It's the way the world is.
yep.
But anyways, if anybody gets a kick out of the book and learns something, it makes me feel real good. So thank you.
Yeah. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Like I said, I found myself setting up at night reading it and like giggling and laughing to myself, but trying to stay quiet too, because I'm like having fits of laughter reading all of the tribulations that you've been through.
Great. Well, I'm going to mark that one paid. The fact that that brought you some joy, sitting in bed laughing, brings me a lot of joy. So thank you so much, John, for mentioning that.
Yes, not a problem. Well, thank you for joining us today, Dave. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to being able to talk with you again soon.
I hope so.
And we'll see if we can have Ken involved and see, you know, what other trouble you've gotten yourself into.
Okay. All right. All the best. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye. Very good.
I hope you got what you wanted. Yoo-hoo!
Yeah,
It's in
yeah.
the can.
That should be good. We'll go through and it will come out next Monday, or this coming
Right.
Monday rather.
So you won't have to
And-
send me a link. I can just go onto your site and take the link, and then I got all the social media. I'll share it on all my different platforms.
Okay, that works for me. I was gonna say I usually respond in an email with the link ahead of
Oh,
time.
please do that. No, sorry, I don't want to
Yeah.
discourage you because I'm
No,
not.
no, no.
No, do whatever you were going to do because I couldn't even find your Zoom invitation. So just send that to me. It was there right after I said it's not there. Of course, it's there. That's the way it works,
Yeah,
I'm 62. So that'd be great. And then I'll wonder if anybody's going to send in a comment about some dumb beekeeping thing. You'll choose one and send in the book.
yeah, we'll definitely do that. And then the publisher agreed to just ship it from there, so that way we didn't have to coordinate
Easy,
coming to
yeah.
Austin and then sending it out. So
Yeah, they're
I will,
great. So you don't have to worry about doing that. And we'll just keep in touch. I'll let you know if I come up with another book. I don't think it's going to be on beekeeping. So the problem is that now everybody thinks I'm an expert. They're asking me questions and stuff. Like.
Well, one of the promo things talked about how if the world ever goes back to normal, you were going to be doing a presentation about how everything you learned as this came from beekeeping.
Right.
You could do a book on a subject like that where you show the parallels on these lessons and how they apply to life, and then it's about bees but not about bees.
Right. You know what? I was the premise was going to be everything I learned about organizing an Olympic Games, because I worked on several Olympic Games. It's my career for 10 years. I learned from the bees, and there's parallels that as the organizing committee grew, we added more and more floors to our building, just like you do in a hive, and how the way we collaborate. It was a cool idea. And a friend of mine's an instructor down in Stanford, and he invited me down to lecture on that. And I was all set to do it. Then COVID hits,
Yeah.
But then I auditioned for a TED Talks up here with that topic, but I got rejected. They didn't.
Oh.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know what it was. Maybe they didn't like my beard, but I never got the go ahead. But that's an idea that I have, is more lectures. So let's keep in touch. I might come up with some other crazy bee ideas, and I really felt good about I'll tell you something interesting is that I've done a lot of interviews up here in Canada for the book, but most people don't even read it. I mean, it'll be some commercial radio station and the book came out and the disc jockey gives you 3 minutes and they go, oh, well, tell us about bees. Well, they make honey, right? What do you feed them? Next,
Yeah.
You took the time to read it, knew a little bit about it, which to me makes the interview much more interesting. And we had 45 minutes. So
Yeah.
Kind of sick and tired of doing these quick little hits just for promo to sell books. It's nice to really get into it, have a conversation with somebody that cares a little bit,
Yeah. That's
So it's a
that's
very
kinda,
enjoyable experience for me.
I'm glad that comes off that way, because that's kind of what I do. I've had a couple of guests be very stripped out because they're like, well, go ahead and send me a list of whatever questions we're going to talk about. And I'm like, I don't really have a list necessarily. I might write down like 3 key points, but it's all conversation, and wherever the conversation leads us, that's where we're going. Like, I've got no agenda.
I felt the flow was good and it was funny, and it took us to places that I really enjoyed the last, the last 50 minutes. And I think it was time well spent. And so next Monday or Tuesday, you'll send me a link and I can listen to it all. And it's absolutely very, very beneficial for me as I promote the book. And, we got reviewed in the New York Times, which just blows me away. I mean, that's just like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And that really helped the sales on Amazon and stuff like this. This is so targeted. It's one thing to be in the New York Times where 1 in every 1,000 person cares about bees.
Right.
But everybody that listens to your podcast is really interested in bees. So
Yes.
It's a completely different way of marketing it. It's so well targeted that I really appreciate the opportunity. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you again. I appreciate it. I had a blast.
Okay. Good stuff, John. Stay well. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a great day.
This Hive Jive production was made possible by amazing patrons like you, and we appreciate your support. To all our Hive Jive junkies out there, you truly are the bee's knees.